All right. We are live with Bet What Happens Live for the first Monday night football game of the season between the Buffalo Bills visiting the New York Jets. And some big news in this game. Aaron Rodgers goes down very early in the game with what they're saying is an ankle injury. So he is out for the rest of the game. Zach Wilson filling in at quarterback. Right now, the Buffalo Bills do lead 10-3 at the 2-minute warning here, and they do have the ball. So, Grant, I want to get your quick reaction, quick thoughts on this Aaron Rodgers injury and how you think it impacts the game.
Well, I mean, I'm not terribly happy about it, considering I had some overs that are officially dead. But it's going to affect the game a ton. I mean, we know what Zach Wilson is. I mean, there's talks in the offseason that he's looking better in training camp. That he was looking better. That his mood is better. I mean, that in New York, that seems to be a huge thing that can actually affect. I mean, he's also a young guy, so we don't really know if he's going to be improved much at all. My guess is he's the same quarterback as he was last year, maybe a 5%, 10% bump, which is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. His receiving core pretty much similar to last year. I mean, maybe a slight upgrade with Lazard in there, in Cobb, but realistically, we're looking at pretty much the same offense we were looking at last year with him. Dalvin Cook is obviously an upgrade, but realistically, they already had Michael Carter and they had Breece Hall in there. So it's more just getting change of pace backs in there. So I don't see much of a difference at all in this offense. So weather conditions aren't great. He's not good. I say this all with Garrett Wilson's overs also, hoping that I'm wrong, but as of right
Speaking of Garrett Wilson over, so let me jump in there because I think this is pretty important. Our live betting model shows Garrett Wilson for full game passing yards at 178.5. His current line is 166.5. And based off the game's status right now, they should get the ball back before the 2-minute warning. So they will be throwing the ball. So my first pick on Bet What Happens Live already, I'm taking it right away. I'm taking Garrett Wilson over 166.5 passing yards. They're going to be throwing the ball the rest of the game. So that is an official locked in pick. Zach Wilson. Too many Wilsons, over 166.5 passing yards. What do you think about that, Grant?
I really like that one. I mean, again, he's garbage, but mostly what we're looking for is game script. Mostly what we're looking for is what the pass volume is going to be. They have no reason not to give it a try. They don't know how long Aaron Rodgers is going to be out. They know that Zach Wilson is going to probably be the interim guy for the next few weeks, assuming that Aaron Rodgers is out, which walking boot, bad ankle sprain. I mean, we know we've seen him multiple times, but it's at least this week, short week of rest, and Monday Night Football, and then eventually on Sunday. So going to be a shorter week. I would doubt that he would end up playing next week. Again, we don't have a ton of information on it. So Wilson is going to be in the game. I would assume that they're just going to let him try and get comfortable in this offense because he is the backup. He will be the starter probably this week, potentially for a few more weeks. They have no idea. So they're going to let him throw the ball a little bit, get used to playing with Lazard, get used to playing with Randall Cobb. So I would assume that he's just going to be a full go for the rest of the game, which means that this line is probably a little bit low. I mean, we look at what he did last year, and granted, last time he played the Bills, put up 154 yards, but it's a tough matchup. Game script, they didn't really have any reason to try and push it towards the end of the game. The score was 20-17, so they're mostly running the ball. This game script is entirely different, so we assume something similar. I could expect 120 yards out of him in the second half at least, but most likely 130 to 140, just because they're going to be slinging the ball the entire time. They have Garrett Wilson in there. They have Lazard in there who's solid. So, like, he has guys to pass to. And Conklin's a pretty solid wide receiver. They have Breece Hall. They have Michael Carter. They have Dalvin Cook. They have three running backs that, at the very least, when Bills are trying to do a little bit of prevent defense, they're going to give up chunks of yards to all three running backs if they're in the game. And we've seen Breece Hall go for a massive, massive game. Granted, that was when White was in the game, I think, or Flacco. I can't remember which. I know Zach Wilson doesn't pass off the ball as much to running backs, but he'll end up doing it more in this game. So overall, I really like that bet. I'm trying to figure out what bet I want.
Let me jump in here real quick because we are at 40 seconds left. The New York Jets did get a first down, so it looks like they may be able to bleed out the clock on this half. but that's actually okay. Now, the Jets won't start with the ball in the second half either, but the live line on Garrett Wilson actually dropped to 157.5 while we were talking. So it went from 166.5 down to 157.5. Even if I put in second half and start at the beginning of the second half, we're still projecting Zach Wilson. I keep saying Garrett Wilson. We're still projecting Zach Wilson to go well over that 157.5. So I'm going to bet again. I'm going to take Zach Wilson over 157.5 passing yards. And heck, there's a chance they may get the ball back still at the end of this half. So, that 181.5 number we're projecting is a bit optimistic. But even if it comes down 20 so yards, that is still value according to our in-game model here. So I'm going to double down on Zach Wilson over 157.5 passing yards. Now it's down to 154.5 now. As this game goes on, Josh Allen just getting sacked there for 3 yards. You got to think they'll milk the clock out here and kick a field goal.
Yeah, and they obviously can milk it all the way down to 0. So that's what's going to happen unless they end up getting a touchdown here off of a run. Bet I'm looking at, and I want to hear what your model says. I know we were talking about it slightly before the game, but Garrett Wilson's receiving yards is now down to 37.5. That to me seems too low, even with Zach Wilson. I mean, last time they played Buffalo, he ended up with 92 yards. Even with Zach Wilson under helm, I know that Wilson struggled a little bit, but that was more earlier on in the season. He started to come into his own a little bit later in the season without Zach Wilson, whether that was just strictly because of Zach Wilson or because just getting more playing time. But I have to expect, again, they're going to be passing the ball. He should get 6 to 8 targets in the second half. The guy is great in the open field. The guy is just a great overall receiver. Just based on volume here, I think that line's a little bit too low. So what does the betting model have to say about 37.5?
Yeah, 37.5. We are showing 57.2% to the over. And that's assuming what I'm going to assume in our assumptions here is start of the second half and Buffalo grabs a field goal here. So there's actually, even more potential to go over than that if Buffalo were to score a touchdown or something like that. I'm showing 57.2% to the over there at the start of the second half.
I like it. I like it when the model agrees with me. Another interesting one is Conklin, 10.5 receiving yards. I mean, he's gotten targeted a couple times here, at least once, I think twice, if I remember correctly. But 10.5 yards seems a little bit low. Again, the game script really favors him. I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger like Wilson is now down to 36.5, so definitely hit it there. That brings it up to probably a 60% hit rate.
Well, so here's the thing about Conklin, and I'm agreeing with you here. We have Conklin for a full game projection to go over over 10.5 receiving yards, 63.8% of the time, right? He has 2 receiving yards now, and we're giving him a median of 15.5 more because the Jets should be throwing the rest of the game. And he should be a favorite target, along with Garrett Wilson, of Zach Wilson. And, I think this is just a spot where, because there's going to be so much passing volume, we can start looking at some of these Jets overs. We talked about Zach Wilson over passing yards. You're on Garrett Wilson over 36.5 passing yards. Conklin over 10.5 looks very enticing as well per my in-game model.
I love it. Really like it when the model agrees with me. I'm trying to look at some of these other props, and one guy that we talked about that was interesting to me, or was interesting to you, that I agreed with is Damian Harris. So current rushing yard total is sitting at 18.5. Obviously, game script, they're going to be up 13 or up 10 going into the second half in all likelihood. Likely going to be running the ball. Don't really want to try and make too many mistakes. Let the Jets somehow backdoor into this. They're just going to let Zach Wilson be Zach Wilson. And something happens, it happens. So he's currently sitting at 18.5 receiving yards, and he's sitting at his rushing yards total. His receiving yards is sitting at 13.5. That's not right. They don't even have it on there. His rushing plus receiving is sitting at 35.5. So they're kind of assuming that he's going to get about 10 receiving yards is my guess. Let's see, 15. And he's sitting at, so about 5 receiving yards. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think both.
He's sitting at 13 receiving, 3 rushing right now. And so if we're going to look at rest of game rushing plus receiving yards for Damian Harris, so he has 16 right now, and rest of game, we are projecting him for another 23. So 16 plus 23 would be 39 total rushing plus receiving yards. He's sitting at 35.5. Now, I think we're probably showing a little bit more value on the rushing side of things for Damian Harris, especially because the Bills are so far ahead. But it's also one of those counterintuitive spots where maybe he gets a few extra receiving yards just because he gets more run because they're ahead.
Yeah. No, that's kind of my thought too. I mean, if you can't decide which one to go with, just go halfsies on both. It's really
Exactly.
simple. Go half unit on both. Definitely not bad. Anything else looking interesting to you? I mean, Lazard's sitting at 22 receiving yards. His total's at 39.5. Cook at 8.5. We talked about it a little bit. It's kind of tough to expect him.
Honestly, I think the number one thing we're going to want to look at is the one you brought up, Tyler Conklin. Once kind of halftime settles in, right? Because we did just roll over to halftime here for this game. So it is officially halftime. The Buffalo Bills lead 13-3, so they have a 10-point lead at halftime over the New York Jets. So Zach Wilson right now, 41 passing yards. Just going to kind of reset here. Josh Allen, 133 passing yards. So if we look just real quickly at the passing games, we have Josh Allen for a full game projection of 222 and Zach Wilson 178.5. Now looking at the Bet365 lines for these players, we have 226.5 for Josh Allen versus 222. Not much in there in terms of value for Josh Allen, but we still are showing quite a bit of value. Zach Wilson 157.5. We are showing 178.5. So a lot of value there on Zach Wilson's over. Now they aren't starting with the ball. The Jets are not starting with the ball, but I still like that over. So let's take a look at that Jets receiving game, specifically Tyler Conklin. Is that still 10.5?
Just got a report that Rodgers may have an Achilles injury. So
yeah,
if it's a torn Achilles, then out for the season.
Yeah, he would be out for the season. So Tyler Conklin over 10.5 yards. We are showing, we're showing 15.5 for the rest of the game, let alone the 2 he already has. So I think we have to take that over at 60, almost 64% to the over here.
Yep.
All right, so we're both on Tyler Conklin over 10.5 receiving yards, locking in another bet here. So both Grant and I over 10.5 Tyler Conklin. So we've got Tyler Conklin over. You've got Garrett Wilson's over on his receiving yards. I've got Zach Wilson over on his passing yards. We really need this Jets offense to come through in the passing game. Where else besides the Jets passing game do you want to look next now that we've got kind of halftime to settle ourselves in here?
So Dalton Kincaid, 25.5. Not looking too bad. I don't think I'm going with Davis. Davis, like, obviously had a big reception. His total sitting at 38.5. Not really expecting that. I mean, Bills don't really shadow guys too much, so Diggs is still in play, and actually Diggs is also interesting at 7.5. But we'll get to that in a second. Kincaid, even though they're not going to be passing the ball a ton, they will still pass. He needs 9 more yards in order to hit the over on that. I have to assume that's just one catch in the second half, even with the lower than normal passing volume for the Bills. They're not a team that's just going to full on just run the ball over and over again. It's going to be an uptick, but they will still pass the ball a bit in this spot. I think that Kincaid's line is a little bit low. What does the model say?
Yeah, this is one of those spots where I'm totally fine if you override the model because it is kind of a weird situation. So it's saying it's pretty much 50-50. The thing I like here is if Buffalo, and they start with the ball here in the second half, if Buffalo is able to, and now that I'm thinking about it, do they actually start with the ball? No, the Bills start a ball. So the Jets are actually starting with the ball. It makes me like the Jets overs even more.
I was going to say, I just figured, okay, you're right.
Yeah. That was one of those. I just totally forgot the Jets went, pretty quick 5 plays and then punted because the Aaron Rodgers injury kind of threw everything off. So we're showing like almost 50-50 on Dalton Kincaid, 25.5. But if Buffalo were maybe to score again, I could see them really wanting to get the rookie involved in the offense, despite it being a potential blowout. So maybe giving him not necessarily like junk time run, but just kind of trying to get him more involved to see, to get him used to NFL gameplay, to get up to speed there. So it's one of those counterintuitive situations where I could understand disagreeing with the model.
Yeah, I mean, and also he's got 3 targets already. Like they're not going to be airing the ball out to him too much. Like it'll be higher percentage catches. So yeah, I'm going to officially make that a bet.
There you go. So Grant is taking Dalton Kincaid over 25.5 receiving yards. So we got a plethora of bets here, all overs right now. Now, there is a couple unders I was looking at pregame. I was looking at Josh Allen under on his rushing yards because we were showing projection value there. And then I was looking at Dalvin Cook under on his rushing yards as well. So right now, Dalvin Cook's live line is 35.5 rushing yards, and he has currently 16 rushing yards. So, he would need about 19 more to break that, but he only has 16 right now. We do think the Jets are going to be throwing more. So we're actually showing 65% value to Dalvin Cook's under 35.5 rushing yards. And I think that correlates perfectly with these Jets overs in the passing game. So I'm also going to lock in Dalvin Cook under 35.5 rushing yards for this game. So I'm already at the 4 bets. Of course, 2 of them are on Zach Wilson under passing yards. So it's really like it's 1, but I have 2 different yardage numbers there. Over. Yeah. Zach Wilson over passing yards. Yeah. So, but that's at 2 different numbers. So at least hopefully I'll get one of those 2, but to correlate with that and to correlate with the Tyler Conklin over, I'm going to take a Dalvin Cook under 35.5 rushing yards. Your thought on that or anywhere else you would like to go?
I really like that one. I mean, Cook, he's fine. He's fine in the receiving game. He's above average, but Carter is above average and Hall is above average. I think that they're more than likely going to give Hall. It's an uptick in usage for both Hall and Carter, I think, in the second half. So I do like that. And again, game script, they have no reason to run Dalvin Cook that much. Like end of the game, I would have to assume they're just going to throw Carter in there. Like he's the de facto 3rd overall running back. They don't want to risk Breece Hall getting injured. So Cook and Hall are the
that would definitely be the thing that worries me the most would be if they don't want to risk Breece Hall getting injured. Maybe they run Dalvin more, but I actually think you're right. I think they go to Michael Carter and just try to get him some run in a blowout game. Just preserve both Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall for upcoming games because they're going to need to rely on them if Aaron Rodgers is missing multiple games, which it very much sounds like he'll be missing at least multiple games, if not the rest of the year.
Yep. I want to see what the model has to say about a bet I made in game that I'm feeling like I might actually win a bet. By the way, what number does the model have for Josh Allen rushing yards?
Josh Allen rushing yards for right now. So he has 20 right now, and he's 29 now. So I missed one of those there. We're kind of wrapping up the half. So he has 29. We're projecting his rest of game median for 18.5. So that means right around 47.5 full game rushing yards for Josh Allen.
Okay, so the model actually likes the over.
Yeah, so 45.5 is the current over under, and we're showing 47.5 as a full game projection.
All right, that's good. I have his over at 37.5 and 38.5. So I might win a bet tonight. Might win a pre-game bet tonight. I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling good about my during game bets. I'm not feeling good about any of my pre-game bets outside of that. And then the other one was Deontay Harris under 18.5 receiving yards. Currently sitting at 16.5. The pre-game line was 18.5. Had 9 in the first half. Was heavily involved in first and second drive, and we haven't seen much from him since. I don't think he's going to be that heavily involved. I don't think they're going to be passing the ball a lot. So my thought process is I liked it under at 18.5 in first half. Game script is going to suppress that line even more. So 16.5. The under seems a little appealing.
I like that too. So we are showing 57.3% to the under. And another thing about that is if this game does continue to blow out, maybe Hardy still gets a little bit more run, but what I really think could happen is Khalil Shakir, Trent Sherfield could start to see some snaps, because if we look at snap counts right now for the Buffalo Bills, Deontay Hardy has run 9 routes, but that's not as many, of course, as Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis at 22, Knox and Kincaid at 18. But I do think maybe we start to see some run for Khalil Shakir and Trent Sherfield as well. So I do like that under on 16.5 receiving yards for Deontay Hardy. Deontay Hardy. I think he was Harris, and I think he officially changed it to Hardy, but Bet365 still showing Harris. So for those of you watching at home, make sure to not get confused. Deontay Harris, Deontay Hardy is the same person.
Yep. So that threw me. And it also threw off. I don't know if you had the volume on at the beginning of the game. Pretty sure they called him Harris on accident a few times. It doesn't help that Damian Harris is there too. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Fun.
So are you locking in that one or still considering that one?
Yep, I'm locking it in. I'm a big fan of doubling down on the values there. What's your thoughts on
I'm into. I'm going to go in on Deontay Harris, Deontay Hardy under 16.5 receiving yards. We're showing 57.5% value on that. Bills are not starting with the ball, as I have obviously corrected my thought process there. So there's probably even a little extra undervalue there. Or it could be a spot if you want to wait through this Jets drive, right? If the Jets don't score here, then it becomes even more valuable because the Bills go even more run heavy. So I locked it in maybe a little bit early. Sometimes I like to wait for the first drive of these on ones where I'm showing 55, 58% value instead of over 60%. But, Grant twisted my arm here.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. It was funny. I was just looking up Garrett Wilson in the rushing game because his receiving prop is at 36.5 and his rushing plus receiving is at 37.5. I'm like, yeah, I feel like I had a few runs last year. Runs of -2, 7, 0, and -1. So I don't know if I'd probably just roll with the regular receiving yards bet if you haven't already done so. But it was just something interesting I was looking at. And look, closing line value so far, Conklin up to 11.5 receiving yards. So we got that going for us. Let's look at these second half touchdowns.
I was just doing that. So Garrett Wilson plus 550, Allen Lazard 10-1 on second half anytime touchdown score. Even adjusting for Zach Wilson, making sure I'm not getting my Wilsons confused. Even adjusting for Zach Wilson, we are showing over. We're showing anytime touchdown value on both Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard. If you have a preference for one or the other or both.
I have a preference for Garrett Wilson. Again, I bet him first touchdown score, anytime touchdown score. I mean, granted, that was all under the preface of Aaron Rodgers playing, but I also got first touchdown score at plus 130. Now it's sitting at plus 550. Taking into account that Rodgers isn't playing, let's drop his touchdown percentage down 50%. He only had 4 last season, and he realistically, considering all his other numbers, he's due for some positive regression here. Game script favors him. There weren't in a lot of close games last year.
Right.
A lot of them were, they weren't in a lot of games where they really had to throw the ball a ton. I think it was 4 games last year where they had losses of more than 10 points. So, yeah, again, this is a game script that really favors him in the spot. I think he's going to have a big second half. Maybe it's just hope, but also he should have a bigger second half than all these numbers are implying. What about Breece Hall at plus 750? What's the model say about that? Because I think Cook got 1 or 2 snaps in the red zone, and I think that Hall got 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're showing a lot of anytime touchdown value. It seems Bet365 has adjusted more than our model has for touchdowns, even with Zach Wilson in, right? We lowered it, right? So the game going in was 44.5 for the over-under. We're saying, well, okay, with Zach Wilson, they actually would have been 6.5 point dogs, the Jets. and the total would actually have been 42 going into the game. So even adjusting for those things, and now the current game situation, we've got Breece Hall plus 555 anytime touchdown. So 7-1 is interesting. Another one I like, Damian Harris, right? Could he, now that he is going to be rushing more, could he be someone that, we potentially see anytime touchdown value with the Bills rushing more?
Yep. No, I think that's not a bad bet at all. Again, I mean, we saw him in the red zone pretty much in his entire time in his career. He's a guy that they'll use. I mean, Zach Moss is in there, but Zach Moss's odds, I think, are a bit worse. Not Zach Moss, James Cook.
James Cook, yeah.
Wrong.
So
anytime
touchdown score. So we just are about to kick off. Looks like we kicked off second half here.
First play just happened. Breece Hall for 0 yards, pretty much.
So that those anytime touchdown scores or second half touchdown scores, I should say, are off the board. But we can still do anytime. And Damian Harris plus 550 anytime. I did like the 7-1 second half, but unfortunately we weren't able to get those
Harris
in.
So something to note, since the Bills have not had the ball yet, Damian Harris' second half touchdown is still up there at plus 1,200.
I see Buffalo Bills second half touchdown. Oh, second touchdown score, not second half.
Oh,
it's to score to score the Bills' next touchdown. Yeah, but earlier there was a second half touchdown score that they have since taken down since the half started. So we didn't quite get to those in time, unfortunately. But he was 7-1 for second half touchdown until they went live into this second half here. So we are just a couple plays into the second half. Zach Wilson still yet to complete a pass on first or second down here, but on third down he is able to complete a pass there to Garrett Wilson. So I know you have the over.
I want to see this beauty. Yeah. Darn delay. Oh, man.
Completes it for 12 yards. So very nice, wide open over the middle. We're kind of looking at this saying, especially if the Jets, if they get into the game a little bit more, it does make me worry about my Dalvin Cook rushing under. But of course, that also means it's helping the Jets are moving the ball, so it's helping our passing game overs. So even though there's some natural correlation there, I still like the passing game overs. So we do have. Speaking of Dalvin Cook, he does. Was that Dalvin or Breece? That was Dalvin Cook, but that was a passing play for 7 yards. So Dalvin Cook 7 yards. I'm still trying to get used to the numbers of new players and new situations here. So Dalvin Cook 7 yards.
It's horribly confusing. Every single time, it's so confusing trying to remember.
Yeah, for sure. So battle of the Cook brothers here. We got two Cooks, we got two Wilsons, we got new numbers, new faces and new places, and another dump off for Zach Wilson, and this time it's to Breece Hall. So we're getting that over. It looks like we might be getting that over on those passing yards for Zach Wilson. So 20-yard passing play there.
Yeah, so it's interesting right now. They're running with both Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook in the backfield, and then I think it was Conklin, Wilson, and Lazard in there. So I won't be surprised if they run that pretty much the rest of the game. It's going to be way easier on Zach Wilson. He'll have a dump out on both sides. Right there, Zach Wilson was about to get blown up, and he just drops it off to Breece Hall. So I think it's looking really good for the Zach Wilson over on passing yards. And it's looking good for a Breece Hall touchdown and Zach Wilson touchdown, or Garrett Wilson touchdown, just because they're driving a little bit here.
Unfortunately, the one thing that's not looking good for is the Dalvin Cook under rushing yards. He just gets a nice long rush there. He's at 25 rushing yards total now. And again, would help a lot less if the Jets score a touchdown here. And they have been driving. They are getting close to the red zone here. 2nd and 1 for the New York Jets. If they were to score here, is there any spot you'd consider looking at before we sign off?
I mean, I was going to look at the money line here. I thought about hitting it at plus 1,200 just because team down 10 points that literally almost made the playoffs last year and has a solid defense. Now it's at plus 7 or 825. So I'm guessing it's 3rd down and 1. They're down in 2 now. 825 for the Jets isn't looking too bad. I mean, we'll know if it's blowing up here on the next play. But that's the bet I would be looking at.
Yeah, so it is 3rd and 2 here for the New York Jets, and we'll just have to see what happens here. I know you and I both have a little bit of delay, but they do get the first down through Dalvin Cook once again. So Dalvin Cook getting that first down. Another thing I think is very interesting would be the in-game total. Now, I don't want to do it before they have scored, but if we look at the pace splits that I have here, and this should be pretty relevant now that Zach Wilson is back in at quarterback. So the pace splits in a close game, in a New York Jets lead or in a Buffalo lead, and obviously we're not going to be in the New York Jets leading by a score or more situation, but these teams combine for either 3 in a close game, 3 seconds per play faster, or 4.86 seconds per play faster if Buffalo has more than a touchdown lead. So the pace should speed up between these two teams, right? Like Buffalo is going to slow down relative to where they play, but they're still faster than league average for a team that is leading by more than a score. That's what I mean by these pace splits here. So it could be a little counterintuitive that Buffalo would be faster, but it's faster than other teams that are leading with this average. And similarly, the Jets are faster than other teams trailing. So could be looking at some overs. I really would like to look at the over, especially if the Jets score, because, you know, it's one of those spots where the Jets, especially with Zach Wilson, not great at scoring. So if they do score, that would be huge.
Yeah. No, so this will now have some things to watch in this game. It won't be terrible if the Jets end up scoring. It could be a fun game here.
Yeah, could get very, very interesting. So we got several bets in. We got a couple places to look. Leave you all with a couple of places to look, and we will sign off for the second half here. Thanks for joining Bet What Happens Live, everyone. I'm excited for Thursday Night Football. I already took Minnesota plus 7.5 versus the Eagles. So Grant and I will be back on Thursday. Bet What Happens Live at the 2-minute warning for the Minnesota Vikings at the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see you then. Take care.